And I'm going to hit the record button for those people that have missed it. So there is an October 15th deadline for the first assignment. So, but probably anyway. So remember that if you haven't done that one yet. So I'm trying to work off 2 computers in case mine shuts down in the middle of this. I don't have a lot of. I don't have a lot of faith that this computer will do it, but we'll see. All right. So class, we got that going on. All the meetings that might have happened this fall aren't going to happen. So there's that. It's a fun fall. All right. And if nobody has questions, I'll just keep on trucking. So my wife tells me it's whatever show premiere or whatever. This is us. It's us. Something about that, but. All right, so let's move into the webinar end of it, since y'all are so nice and not asking any questions. So where do we get grape growing statistics? And we'll talk about Texas. I don't know. I think everybody here is a Texan or is in Texas. Maybe they want to be somewhere else, but so where do we get it? So 2 or 3 different places. The USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, the National Agricultural Statistics Service. I usually give myself a pat on the back if I can say that all the way through successfully. So I think I'm already on 2. So so there's that. They do a grower survey occasionally. So it is yearly. So they do gather basic information, and then usually every 2 years or so, depending on the funding status. So this is an industry funded initiative. So sometimes the money comes from different places, but overall it is industry that funds it. And that can be, well, anyway, sometimes there's not money. So so it was done. So it was done in 2010, and then there was a big gap of time. And it was done in 2015 and 2017 and 2019. And when I'm talking in depth, I'll show you what it looks like. But it's asking for variety level information. It's asking for production information at the variety level. It's also asking for price at the variety level. Now the problem with this survey is that it is voluntary. So here's a copy of the 2019 survey. So in other words, you don't have to fill it out if you get contacted. This probably represents the most comprehensive study so far. So they are talking about that they reached out to 736 Texas grape growers who have or are believed to have vineyards. So, and they do bug you until you get the information to them or until you tell them to go away. So this information, this is where it comes from. Obviously, people who's on the list. So sometimes a lot of small growers may not be on the list. Sometimes some of the big growers may not want to be on the list. So there's that issue. But I would say 736 individuals who are believed to have vineyards is a pretty good number for Texas. So I think they really made a good effort to try to get the list, and they worked with multiple people to get the list. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if people don't answer the questions, then, or don't answer the survey, then the information doesn't get in there. But it's probably the best thing that we have. People argue that it's not complete, and or sometimes they argue that there is more. Sometimes people argue there is places. Well, mainly it's all about numbers and where the numbers are, but I think it's fairly accurate as far as we can tell. The other thing that's out there is the Census of Agriculture. So that happens every 5 years. So the last one was done in 2017. So that information is out there now. It's not voluntary. It says your response is required by law. So it's not voluntary, but you still doesn't, I don't see a lot of census police out there knocking on people's doors, arresting people for not filling out their Census of Agriculture. But in theory, it's supposed to be a better reflection of the numbers. Now then, I'll show you the numbers from 2012, which I think are pretty accurate. The problem is 2017, and I don't have this in the presentation, but the 2017 numbers kind of fell off from the 2012 numbers by about 2,000 acres, 2,100 acres, or aren't showing up on the census in 2017 that showed up in 2012. So, so there's that particular problem. So, anyway,
Kirk,
there's not anything perfect. Yes.
Twiga posts an annual survey, a grape grower survey every year. Is that independent of what's being reported, or are they just taking these statistics and reporting them again?
No, they're funding they're at least one of the funders of the NASS survey. So okay. Whatever it is that they are working on numbers wise is coming from this survey, the NASS survey, grower survey. Good question though, but all right. That's the sources. So this is what the survey looks like. It does ask for non-bearing acres, and it does ask for bearing acres, and it asks for quantity harvested in total. They are asking for a variety of red, so they ask for red varieties, they ask for white varieties, and quantity of each, price for each. So this is fairly sensitive information, especially when it comes to price. So there is a other category. So this is, other varieties. So they have red, they have white, and these are basically have been the top varieties over a period of time. Although those numbers have changed, although I would say this list now is a little dated compared to things how things are being grown now. But there is other varieties, so that you can put in other varieties that didn't make this list. So, and of course, I'm going to say that people sometimes are just shooting from the hip when they're answering, so that's also the other issue, especially maybe with tonnage. It's maybe, there's always a hope that somebody's sitting down and with all the information in front of them. The problem is when they call people, there's a 90% chance that a grape grower is not sitting with all of his yields in front of them. So every time they've called me, I said, I can't do it over the phone. I'll just do it on a piece of paper when I can have everything in front of me. So, but of course, they want answers. So it could be that people give them answers and that satisfies them, and then the numbers may not be quite so accurate. But so that's the difference between phone calls and doing it online or doing it on a piece of paper. So Okay. There is another source of information, and it's a completely, it is basically one guy and some volunteers. Jeff Cope does this Texas Wine Lover website, and it's not his job, but he collects people that grow grapes, as well as people that have wineries. He has a list. It's completely accessible, completely free. Um, I gotta let somebody in the room. If I was smart, I would just set it up so that people would come in the room, but now she's not there anymore. All right, so that's kind of what's at the bottom. So he has a list of all the vineyards in Texas. Um, he's tracking 6,211 acres, so it's a fairly complete list. What's up at the top is another compilation of some information, and it's no longer, it's not as current as it used to be. So, couple things to point out. So the first thing is for several years. So first of all, the gaps are where no survey got done at all. Okay, so there were years where nothing got done, and then there's years where things got done. So you can kind of see we basically had about a 3,000 acre industry for many, many years. And then at some point, supply and demand started taking over, and we started to have some growth. You can kind of see that reflected in the 2007 agricultural census numbers as far as non-bearing acres really start to jump up, and that would have been in 2007. So you can kind of see that. Okay, that was obvious. 2000, so you can see that jump happening. Then we kind of go back to the NASS surveys, and the information is about what we have been getting, maybe a little bit more. Then you can see the 2012 agricultural census. It says, we jumped to 4,000 bearing acres, and there's 3,000 non-bearing acres of grapes out there. So so that reflected a very big jump and a very big change in the industry. So the weird thing is the 2007 census does not reflect the same numbers. So you can pretty much guess that we have around 5,000, 6,000 bearing acres, 6,200 bearing acres if you count Jeff's numbers as being fairly accurate. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the numbers are looking at. So, and what drove all that growth? Well, so what drove all that growth was winery growth. So we have over 500 wineries in the state of Texas. And the way the G permit works in the state of Texas is that and some people have problems with this, but your business model can be almost like a wine bar. Well, let me just say there are probably some wine bars that are wineries in that winery list. So they're really not processing fruit, but the way the Texas winery permit works, it's an easy way to get into the industry and sell wine. So, and we're not going to talk about the politics of that. Most people would probably prefer to have a different kind of permit for those kind of people, but we don't. So what happened is somewhere in the mid 2000s, so 2005 or so, there was some favorable legislation that came along as a result of lots of people's work, and wineries, and I may be off on the date, but wineries that were in dry areas were now able to sell wine directly to the consumer. So if they were in a dry county or dry part of the county, which is still, dry parts of counties is still fairly common in certain places, then they couldn't really sell wine legally directly to consumers. And there were some other legislative things that happened before that and after that, but a lot of those things kind of opened up the industry for some growth, and and of course that that number of wineries list is somewhat old, but we're over 500. So winery demand fueled a lot of the vineyard growth, which makes perfect sense. Supply and demand. We were probably supplementing a lot of grapes from out of state with Texas wine, with out of state wine or out of state grapes, and that creates its own problems. But the vineyard growers, either current or new, responded by planting a lot more grapes. So much so that we probably last year had grapes that either, well, there were grapes that didn't get sold. That doesn't mean that they didn't wind up someplace, but they may have wind up under the growers, under somebody's care, but not necessarily sold to anybody. So they might have wound up as juice or wine, but still not sold. So, which is unfortunate. Nobody's asked me any controversial questions, so nobody wants to open up the can of worms. But feel free if you want to. Now then, let's take a look at a couple things. Still no questions. That's shocking. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the National Agricultural Statistics Service surveys. So this is from the latest one, which was done. It was released in 2020, early 2020. And it said, well, I'll talk about those numbers, but one of the interesting things I want to point out is that if you are a wannabe grape grower, you should be seeing something that from a market standpoint, you should be looking at, I should be growing white grapes, is what those little pie charts are screaming. So if we think that half the people drink white wine, roughly, I don't know that I have that number in front of me, but roughly, let's just say roughly, half the people drink white wine, then we have probably a market imbalance that as a grower I would address. So yeah, either acres or total production is about the same. So we're having some thunder snow, some crazy weather. You know, the old saying that you get thunder in February, you get a freeze in April. I don't know what thunder in October means. All right, so you could argue, so white grapes sometimes, depending on the variety, may be more, they may have a higher tonnage yield than red grapes. That's not necessarily true, but in some cases it is. So, you know, and so if you looked at that, then maybe the acreage would be different from the production. You know, if you got more tons per acre off white grapes and you had red grapes, but that's not really bearing out in the way these bar graphs are set up. So anyway, I'm just looking at that and saying everybody wants to grow. Well, red grapes may be easier, but I'm just looking at this bar graph and I'm just saying, people need to grow some white grapes. Is what it's saying to me. I would argue that some red grapes are harder to grow than some white grapes. But all right, so let's look at this. So
Kirk,
what's that?
Let me ask you a question. When you talk about production, are you talking about Texas grown grapes or grapes that are grown or juice that's brought in from outside of Texas?
So this is a vineyard survey. So this is only including grapes that are grown in Texas.
Okay.
There's been occasional flashes, maybe last year, where some grapes got exported, but that's not really reflected in the survey. So it's all about Texas grapes. It doesn't delve into winery issues. So, all right. Okay, so this is just a graph that's looking at production over time. It's looking at tons of grapes that are being utilized, processed in Texas. There is a little bit of I don't know. I guess in theory you could grow grapes in something and they could all rot, and that those might not get counted in the utilized category. But anyway, I'm just using the tons utilized category since that means it gets turned into wine, hopefully. So the orange bars are the tons produced and utilized, and then the blue line graph is the tons per acre, the average yield of all the varieties across the entire state. So we see some pretty big jiggy jags. Anybody want to take a wild guess what caused some of those things? 2011, for example.
Freezes.
Okay, so yeah, well, we could probably just boldly just say weather. It wouldn't even be bold to say weather. So weather-related things. 2011 was a severe drought, very severe hot weather event. So it was the hottest and the driest year on record. So it caused reduction of yield across the state, no matter where you were. It was a statewide event. Also, there was in certain places there was some frost events that happened in the spring, so that further impacted yield. So that was 2011. 2006 is an interesting one. It was one of the wetter years, so a lot of fruit was lost just because it was such a wet year, especially in the hill country. So you can see 2013 was another year that was bad in terms of weather, mainly frost events, spring frost events. So you can kind of see these jigs and jags happening over time. But the thing that you want to look at is that our yield, our tons produced has grown, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, since we have 2019 numbers. So from 2015 to 2019, so all those grapes that were non-bearing in 2012 came into production. So 2019 was the biggest year as far as amount of grapes that were produced by a long shot. You can see that we had some good years that was there. The other thing is you can see the variability that happens in the average as well as the total. And that's almost entirely due to weather. So you wouldn't see all these jiggy jags in California because it's just a nice straight line. So what else do I want to say?
I have a question on that, Kirk.
Okay.
I mean, obviously California has weather issues too, so why is their line straighter?
They don't have the weather issues that we have.
Okay.
So I mean, if they get a half an inch at harvest in the beginning, I mean, so yeah, I mean, all right, I don't want to totally. So yes, they've had some weather issues, like especially with fires. But overall, the vast majority of the growing area, it's just shockingly nice. So I mean, it stops raining mid-March. It doesn't rain again until maybe October 15th or November 1st. The weather warms up gradually, and then it stays at a certain temperature. So there's none of this 70, 80 degrees one day and 30 degrees the next.
Okay.
So there's none of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Every day is another beautiful day. It doesn't rain. So, you just take rain. If you just take summer rain out of the equation, that makes management so much easier. They have one disease they really worry about, and that's powdery mildew. And we probably worry about 5, 6, 7 diseases, depending on where you're at, and what it is you're growing. So it's just a completely different, climate, and they don't. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
It's
you.
very hard to explain how the weather is so nice unless you've lived there.
Yeah. Okay.
So Kirk, following up on Annie's question, and thank you, Annie, for the question. What is it specifically about Texas that creates these big yield variations? Is it summer rain? Is it temperature? Is it drought? Is it hailstorm? I mean, we have a lot of variables.
Yeah,
in
everything
the
you've named,
materials
yes. Everything you've named so far.
Mhm.
Plus, we want to throw in animals. They don't really have raccoons in California. I mean, they don't really have Pierce's disease. They don't have cotton root rot. I mean, they do have Pierce's disease, but it's not like it is here. Whatever problem you said counts. So a lot of it is a freeze or frost. We tend to have a season that starts relatively early, but then we always get these cold snaps, and so we lose a lot of yield that way. We also, depending on where you're at, and the hill country is not immune to this. We also have some really cold temperatures. So, it's, in the high plains, it's not unusual to get to 10 degrees. There's been 3 degrees, 4 degrees. The vines can handle that okay if it's in the dead of winter. They can't handle it if it's in October as well. So, yeah, we have late spring frost. We have fall frost that can be early. We have winter damage. California does not have any winter damage to speak of because they have a benign climate. So, 2020, a lot of varieties, a lot of vineyards had very low production. Some vineyards froze back to the ground. Some vineyards lost entire blocks of vines that are just dead on the high plains because it got cold really quickly last October. So, otherwise, we would have had a lot of excess fruit probably from in the midst of the coronavirus if we hadn't lost a lot of that fruit due to the bad weather. So you want me to keep going? The summer rain can be a big deal. So
I've got a,
What about the size? I mean, acres, and so the average is going to be much more level than just what we have.
yeah, so California's probably gonna have fewer, they're gonna have more bigger, yeah, they're gonna have larger growers. They have a much more established industry. Yeah, so that plays into it, yes. I'm still gonna say that the weather is the big deciding, one of the big deciding factors, yes. All right, good question.
Kirk, what about the numbers on the utilization there? Does that reflect poor quality product or market pressures, or what causes those discrepancies there?
Trying to figure out quantity harvested. And it could be they did away with the question. I just haven't taken it off of my slide. There used to be a distinction between, what you thought. I don't know, there used to be a different way that they asked the questions, but now they're just asking for quantity harvested. So I think that makes sense. I'll take that off in the future. So as a grower, you could say, okay, I got 5 tons, but I could only harvest one variety because the rest of it rotted. So, it's a nebulous. It's kind of hard, but that's you guessing at your tons because you didn't harvest what was there. So that's open for interpretation. So looks like they did away with that terminology, which is good. All right. Oh, and anyway, all right. So let's take a little bit of look at the summary over time. And once again, this information it's there. So this is 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2019. So 2014, so basically our price has remained fairly stable. So that's positive. It's $1,500 in 2014 and $1,605 in 2019. Bearing acres has increased, probably not necessarily a fully accurate number, but it's what's being reported. And once again, keep in mind this is the average across the entire state. It's the average across every grower, every variety, and the survey. And one of the things I didn't get done today is to count up the number of varieties that they are keeping track of, but we're probably tracking 50 individual varieties, everything from some of the hybrids like Champanelle and Chamberson, even Muscadine is showing up, all the way to the other regular, whatever you want to, the regular grapes like Tempranillo and Cabernet and Merlot. So they're tracking all that, and there's obviously big growers, small growers. So we'd expect those numbers to be there. And one of the problems with with this is our average yield is pretty small. So you can see, there's been years where we've touched on 3, and there's years where we're a lot further away from 3 tons the acre. And so if you do the math, you really want to be, you don't really want to be closer to 2. You really want to be closer to 3. So that's all. Yeah. So I'm sure there's, if you look at the individual varieties across the state, you can see a different picture. But like, for example, Norton is a very low yielder. It's like 9/10 of a ton average yield per acre. So that's going to pull down the average. On the flip side, you have varieties that have an average yield of 5 tons or 4 tons. So anyway, they're all averaged in there together, which maybe not the best way to look at the information. They do have it broken out by region. So the hill country is separate, the high plains separate, North Texas is separate, West Texas, far West Texas is separate, and the Gulf Coast is separate. So
I have a question, Kirk.
okay.
How does Texas's average yield compare with California?
I mean, they would probably be laughing at this stuff.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not, it's very dependent on what part of California you're talking about, but
But like statewide in California, what would their average?
yeah, I mean, I don't
be?
really want to go. It's hard to compare state to
Okay.
state, but like the Lodi region that I think we compare kind of similar to, as far as maybe climate and maybe how we do things, which is it's not a very comparison. But anyway, I mean, they would want to get 6 to 8 tons of Cabernet Sauvignon per acre, or they're not really making any money. So, but
Okay.
they're probably selling it for $700 a ton or $600 a ton. So they don't really have that. They don't really have that luxury. Zinfandel, they're a big Zinfandel producer. So Zinfandel, I'm sure, is a big clustered grape. So, I'm sure they would love to get 10 tons the acre and do get 10 tons the acre from Zinfandel. So, and our
Okay.
average is high, but it's not, it's probably, I think our average is 4. So, yeah, 4.2. So, they're definitely, I would say very easily, they're getting double that, but in some varieties, in some situations, in some parts, they're getting triple that. So,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Okay. So this is a look of bearing acres over a period of time. So 10-year period. We actually took some varieties out because they kind of dropped out. Basically, the top 17 or so. So this has changed over time. Every time that the information is updated. So, for example, we added this year we added Tannat, we added Cabernet Franc, and we added Mourvèdre. So we added those 3. Those 3 weren't in the top 17. We took away Pinot Noir, we took away Sauvignon Blanc, and we took away my handy dandy notes. We took away Ruby Cabernet. which I don't really know was, anyway, it was on the list at one point. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at. So just some things to point out is the fact that we've had some pretty exponential growth in Tempranillo. So see if so there's Tempranillo right there. So it's kind of really shot up. I think we have to get people drinking it for it to be sustainable, but a lot of people have planted Tempranillo. A lot of people are making Tempranillo wine. A lot of people are, you know, it's a up and comer. The one of our top weight grapes is Muscat Canelli. It's kind of a sleeper, but relatively productive as a variety, and you can do a lot of different things with it. Maybe one that's not surprising is kind of the flat line on Chardonnay. So nobody's really, I think everybody's decided that we don't really have to grow Chardonnay. So as an industry, so they're okay with that. So Cabernet Franc has had, basically gone from not being a variety that was being tracked in this survey to now being on the top 17. Mourvedre is one that has really grown a lot. It's a late budding variety, so that's helpful. I'm going to say that after 2020, it's going to be hard to get a lot of High Plains growers to get into that. So there are a lot of winter damage to Mourvedre or Mataro, however, Mataro's easier to say. But anyway, so it's a late budding variety, but it's also an extremely late maturing variety. So it really hangs out there into October. So a lot of it had a light freeze on it, and it wasn't harvested yet. So fruit was still on it. And then there was a hammer that happened like the October 31st, where it got to 10 degrees. So just because it's from Spain doesn't mean our climate is similar to Spain in the winter. So
Can I
the
ask
other
you-
two, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kirk. Not to backtrack, but just a quick question. I thought that Chardonnay didn't grow well in Texas. Is that not true?
Yeah, that's true. Well,
Okay.
some people grow it, some people grow it successfully. But you can see nobody's planted. There's been zero movement. There's been no new Chardonnay planted, basically.
Okay.
But it's still in the top 17 because we have basically 50 varieties that we're growing in Texas that has enough acres to be tracked on its own. So
Okay.
it's like at 110 acre. Oh no, it's like at it's at 110 acres. There's actually some non-bearing acreage, but yeah, it's in the top 17, probably because historically, but very early bud break, somewhat disease prone. So, but there are people that successfully grow it. So, in certain places.
Okay.
Now Black Spanish and Blanc de Bois, those are hybrid grapes grown mostly in the Gulf Coast, but they're in the top. Actually, Black Spanish and Blanc de Bois are in the top 5 if we look at bearing acreage and tons of grapes. So Blanc de Bois is actually 4th. So, and Black Spanish is 6th. So that is, so they have them ranked via tons of production. But so, so another one that is that we added to the list is Tannat. So Tannat does very well in the hill country. I'm going to say that the south of France is not much like the high plains in the winter, so I know it suffered a lot of winter damage in the high plains. So the other one that's not on there is Petit Verdot. So once again, I can't. Maybe I shouldn't even try to do this. Anyway, it's another Bordeaux variety. It actually should be on this list. It was just hard to, who did I take off? Anyway, Bordeaux variety, came through the winter of the High Plains winter in fine fashion, which is odd. So, anyway, anybody have any comments? You know, you can, I don't know if you want to, once again, we're looking at the entire state. Every place is different. Every vineyard is different. So it's just a big state, and we just grow a lot of different varieties. So all right. Now I need to get rid of this. Where did you go? Annotation. All right. All right, so this is just looking at it from the total tons, same. These varieties are in a different order, kind of. But anyway, once again, this is impacted by year, so you can see different production in different years. Some years are better for some grapes. Some are better for other years. So you can see the up and movers, especially Tempranillo in terms of tonnage. Viognier is it's a finicky grape, so some years it does well and some years it does not do well. So you can kind of see that variability that happens there. Chenin Blanc is a very productive variety, so it is unfortunately not necessarily very much in demand. So the price per ton is not all that great, but the production is. So, we got some trivia questions for you. Maybe. And what is the highest yielding red or white grape? Let's do it easier. Somebody probably has this in their hands, so it may be easier. But what's the highest yielding white grape in Texas? And you can use the chat box if you want. It's really obscure, so it's not anything that you'd think of unless you knew that it's grown, and unless you maybe had this piece of paper in your hand.
Is it Trebbiano?
That would be the obvious question. That would be the obvious answer, right? And I think it's probably the correct answer, except not in 2019.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you talked about 2017, yes, it would have been up there. In 2019, it was at 3.9 tons per acre. Okay. How about, here's one, Malvasia bianca. came in at 6.5 tons per acre. Now there's only 18 acres of it grown in the whole state, so that's not really very fair. But what about other grapes that are relatively high yielders? Any guesses?
Cabernet Sauvignon.
So it's historically Cabernet Sauvignon in Texas has been a pretty low yielder, and 2019 was no different. It came in at 2.5 tons an acre on average. I would probably, no, it's at 1.5 tons per acre. Once again, that's an average. So obviously averages are made up of things over and above that. So I would probably go to someplace like Italy.
Tempranillo or Montepulciano?
So Montepulciano is, yeah, it's getting up there at 4.4 tons per acre. Tempranillo is at 3.2. So there is a Dolcetto is a kind of obscure, well, I don't know, is that I don't know how obscure it is, but it comes in at 5.1 tons. Now Cinsault, another Rhone variety, is at 5.2 tons. So anyway, there are some relatively high yielders. There's also some relatively low yielders. So okay, so let's talk about price per ton per variety. And once again, I'm talking about this in terms of Vicky said Sangiovese, which is Italian variety, and let me it's at 3.4 tons according to this. So on the higher end, but definitely not at the top. So okay, so let's take a look at prices per ton. So anybody want to take a guess at some of the higher price varieties? And so the less common they are, the higher the price, roughly speaking. Although one of the highest priced grapes is on this list of 17 grapes. So
Syrah?
did somebody say Syrah?
Yeah, Syrah.
All right, that's correct. So Syrah is $1,960 per ton average price. That means there's some above that and some below that. It's not the top one, but it's the one that's on this list. Tempranillo, relatively high at $1,720. So it's on that list. Viognier is probably, Paige says Viognier, he's right, it's up there. It is probably the most highest price white grape at $1,570 per ton on average. Muscat Canelli is right there. It's at $1,590, so it's actually ahead. There's several at 1,800. So Petit Verdot and Petit Syrah is 1,800. Touriga Nacional, which is a Portuguese variety of which there's 46 acres, but $2,430 per ton. So it's the winner. It's the winner as far as price goes. So now then, has an average yield of 2.6 tons. So just kind of keep that in mind. Pinot Noir is a relatively, yeah, it's actually up there a little bit. Pinot Noir is a low yielder at 1.8 tons per acre. So Sorry, Vicky. Pic Pool Blanc, I don't even know if it's on the list. There's not enough acres of Pic Pool Blanc to show up, to be recorded. So the statistics service does, if there's only 2 or 3 growers, or even 1 grower in a region, they won't report the information. So, because you could probably name the Pic Pool Blanc growers on one hand, or even 1 or 2 fingers in certain spots. So, all right. Well, somebody has a list. Yeah, so Negro Amaro is has a high price at $2,035 a ton. So, all right. I didn't update. This is where all the information came from. So I did not update the. I didn't update the Negro Amaro. He's drinking it now. So I didn't update the ag census data. It was kind of disappointing to me that it didn't pick up all the acres that it did in 2012. So, any other questions?
Can I ask kind of a random sideline to all this? I know we're focused on the wine grapes, but are they growing any table grapes in Texas?
I don't. I mean, so I mean, muscadines could be considered a table grape, at least to some extent, right? So there's that. I am sure that they are probably growing a few acres. But of course, the Wine Grape Growers Association is paying for this survey, so they probably don't really, they're probably not too interested in the table grape growers. But to my knowledge, there's no big commercial table grape growers. It would all be just very small.
Okay, I was just curious if that was something that was going on sideline, or if it just maybe those varieties just don't work well here. I just wasn't sure. I was just curious.
No, I mean, I think so you can't really compete with the out of country stuff or the California stuff, because our market is not early enough or late enough to really let that happen. So you can't be a big grape grower.
Gotcha.
You know, normally the large berried grapes tend to be prone to splitting when it rains in the summer around harvest time. So that's the other issue. So there are some varieties that probably work that people probably would grow for farmers markets, but yeah, commercially it's probably not something that's very viable on a large scale. Okay, so this the report, the USDA NASS support report from 2019, I did post it on the discussion board, so that's there. I also posted my notes on here that look like this. So if you have a desire to, you can print those off. So Montepulciano in the High Plains has an average yield of 6.1 tons per acre. So they do have it broke out by region, the detail, which may be help more. It makes it's more relevant information by region versus the entire state. But question has to do about recording over there in the chat box. So I did remember to hit the record button. So it'll be out there, and I'll try to. The next thing is to get it. I'll try to post it in the discussion board in the same spot. So when I can figure out how to do the recording. Annie wants to know what learning module are most students on at this point. So there's a bell-shaped curve. So, you know, there are people that are kind of starting, and there are a lot of people kind of in the middle, like, you know, 3, 4, 5. And then there's always people that are almost done. So that is not a very good answer, but that's the way things usually work. So there are people that are on track, most people, and then there are people that are ahead, and then there's people that are behind. So I don't know which one you are, Annie. I do grade things. Sometimes I don't get around to grading things until, sometimes it takes me a week, but I'm pretty caught up right now. I went to Fredericksburg for a week and I got behind, so. What do you think the top 3 grapes are in the hill country? None of them are white, by the way. No white grapes.
Top in the sense of yield or
In terms of production,
okay.
which tends to go along with acreage, but. TCM are the initials for the first initials. All right, we got a Cabernet. We have a correct answer. That's number 2. So Tempranillo is number 1. Cabernet Sauvignon is number 2. And Mourvedre is number 3. Wackily, Black Spanish is number 4. So, you know, the hill country goes fairly far east the way these regions are drawn. Sangiovese is number 5. Merlot is number 6. Tannat's number 7. Syrah is number 8. Eventually we get to a white grape. Eventually at number 9 is Viognier. And then there's not another white grape till, I mean, so Blanc de Bois, probably from the east side, shows up. Yeah, and then we're back to Chardonnay, Albarino. So, Vicky wants to know, where is that information found? Well, so luckily I have posted it on the discussion board. So the discussion board you can find on the left-hand side menu under communication. Yeah, under communication. So you have to click on discussion, and then I think it's under class information. And then usually you can see it from there. So also you should be able to access like a little, when you log in, you should be able to click on your name and you should be able to see new stuff that's happened. You should be, I can. All right. Annie wants to, I did not drink any good wine. Well, I don't know. I was there for work. Sadly, no. Didn't have a lot of time to drink good wine. Another time, though. All right. All right, so I promised to only keep you an hour, so my part's done. So if y'all want to ask questions, I'm good. Otherwise, I will start shutting it down. All right. Vicky says it was 30 here today. Well, I got to beat because it was 27 for a high here today. I might be exaggerating. 28 for a high. So same thing. I was saying it was that yesterday too. So. All right. I'm going to say bye. Let me turn off the recording.